This video is brought to you by NAD Electronics, makers of the Masters M33 Blue OS streaming DAC amplifier. It does everything from high-res streaming to D-Rack room correction, all with the clarity and power of Purify Eigentakt amplification technology. Find out more at NAD Electronics and visit your local NAD dealer for a demo.
At the end of January earlier this year, I made a list of all the hi-fi gear that I wanted to try at home in 2020. And that was before 2020 went. But top of my list was the Buchardt A500 loudspeaker that you can see behind me, the white speakers here. And this is the Danish company's first active loudspeaker. So inside their sealed cabinet, which looks kind of strange because it leans backwards like this, that's for time aligning the drivers going this way. Inside the cabinet, we've got on the front baffle a 6-inch mid-bass driver and then a soft dome tweeter with a very large aluminium waveguide. But also on the back, we have another 6-inch driver. It's not a passive radiator, it's actually, it's a proper active driver. Each driver gets its own internal enclosure inside the cabinet. So there are 3 separate enclosures, one for each driver. There are also 3 separate DACs and 3 separate Class D amplifiers. So we don't have to play the which amplifier lottery that we would have to with passive loudspeakers. The amplifiers are chosen for us. The same with the DAC and also the same with the streamer, as we'll see. If you're about to complain or grumble about active loudspeakers being all-in-one systems and what the hell happens when something breaks, I would invite you to look at the lump of tin that you have sitting in your driveway and then keep watching. On the back of each loudspeaker, we've got an XLR connector, and that's for sort of old school active loudspeaker users. For new school users, we have Buchardt Stereo Hub, although it's not actually made by them, it's a Chinese brand. But it's a little black box that controls the system if you don't want to use the XLR inputs. So the hub is WISA certified. So what that means is that it takes all the inputs on the back panel and streaming inputs and then sends them out to the loudspeakers wirelessly 2496 PCM. So on the back of the hub, we've got an analog input. Now I feed my phono stage into that. Yes, it has to encode the incoming analog signal to digital before it can stream it out WISA 2496. Also on the back, we've got 1 coax, 3 Toslink, 1 USB, 1 HDMI ARC. So if you want to add external streamers and the like, you can. I have an Intel NUC that's connected to my projector, and I send USB audio out into the hub. But it doesn't stop there, because we also have streaming inputs. So we've got Bluetooth and AirPlay, but we've also got my favorite holy trinity of streaming. So we have Rune Ready, which is not certified yet, Spotify Connect, and Google Chromecast. And no, there is no perceptible lag when dropping the needle onto the record and hearing sound. So I drop the needle, bonk, I hear it, and there's no lag when I'm watching movies from my Intel NUC into my projector. So it's perfect for all sorts of input purposes. This is the remote control. It's quite a nice, elegant, slender thing. There is no Red Hot Chili Peppers button on this, I'm afraid. It's a bit of a shame. There is play, pause, volume changes, source selection. And the source selection is actually really probably this loudspeaker system's only weakness that I can see, is that if you lose this remote or it breaks, there is no real way that I can see to change the source on the stereo hub. So don't lose this. It's very, very important. Now the WISA streaming is controlled on the speaker side, and it is accurate to, so I'm told, to one sample. And that brings us to what goes on inside the speaker, because inside the speaker, with it receiving a digital signal, there is a quad-core DSP chip, which does one heck of a lot of cool things. So first of all, that DSP gives us a phase-accurate crossover, which we just don't get from a passive loudspeaker's passive network. And according to Buchardt, they have done some fairly heavy analysis of driver behavior and then used the DSP to correct for any anomalies. So basically the DSP optimizes the driver's performance. So in its default configuration, the A500 is a 2.5 way. So we've got the tweeter, and then the front and rear mid-bass drivers are doing roughly the same thing. Although I think Mads Buchardt told me that the rear driver is doing some sub-bass, and then between 100 and 250 hertz, there is some sort of cardioid dispersion pattern being executed. But I'm a little bit hazy on that, I got to admit. But the really cool thing about these loudspeakers, or one of them, is that their sound is malleable. We can change it with a USB key. So we can download what Buchardt call master tunings from their website. That's basically a firmware file that rewrites the DSP with new crossover information. So it will instruct the drivers to behave differently. So for example, the default here is a 2.5 way. We can download and install, by inserting the USB key with the firmware file on it, into the back of the speaker. It does a little flash of lights and it's installed, and we get a 3-way loudspeaker. So that means that the tweeter works on its own as normal. The front mid-bass driver does mainly the mid-range and a bit of the upper bass, and then the rear driver just takes care of all of the lower bass. So it sounds different. It actually, to my ears, it separates the bass out a little bit better. I'll come back to that a bit later. But then there's another master tuning, which is a 2.5 way, which gives us a more forward mid-range presentation. Now for me, that was really good with the Future Sound of London's Cascade 2020 EP. It just came out for Record Store Day. But probably a little bit too much for something like the Other's Sweet Bird of Truth 12-inch, which already has a lot of mid-range presence. So you can basically tune the speaker according to your music taste or your mood or whatever. I think I prefer generally as a rule, the forward mid-range tuning. That's for me the better one of the. I think there are 4 or 5 of them now on the website. You can experiment yourself. Just drag a file onto here, insert it in the back of the speaker, and you're up and away. So the DSP changes that I've just spoken about, the master tunings, they reside inside the speaker. But if that wasn't enough, the sound hub also gives us room correction below 300 hertz. And the way it works is actually, it's a little bit ridiculous really. It's a bit like the Sonos thing, and you look at it and you go, how can this possibly work? So what you have to do is you have to take the iOS app, so it's only available for iOS at the moment, and it looks like this. It's really basic. And you click start and you wave it around, the phone around, and the microphone listens to the white noise that the speakers are spilling for a full minute. And you try and sort of cover all of the air in the room, but away from the speaker. I think it's 1.5 meters you have to keep away from them. But the weird thing is even though you feel like an idiot doing it, it actually works. I can't believe it. It's some kind of modern day magic. And I know it works because it found the 35 hertz mode that I've spoken about before that I have in my room. 35 hertz is a problem in this room, and this app found it. And then the app produces a correction curve and then loads it into the hub. It's important you understand that the room correction lives in the hub and the master tunings live in the speaker, so that you know the limitations. Because obviously if you're XLR into the speaker, the master tunings are available to you. But if you want to have room correction, you have to have the hub. And you can turn the room correction on and off with the app. So you can listen sort of before and afterwards. It's quite subtle, or it was for me. It tidied up the bass very nicely. It didn't make a big shift. It's not as dramatic as Dirac. Not at all. Just a nice subtle improvement. So, you know, once you've got your master tuning that you like, then you do the room correction and you have them working together. And you can turn them on and off, you know. It's this flexibility thing which I think is so compelling with this loudspeaker. Now, I don't have similarly priced streaming active loudspeakers with which to compare the A500, but I do have two pairs of conceptually similar loudspeakers that do streaming as well. KEF LS50 Wireless and the ELAC Navis, both of which I've reviewed extensively on my channel and on my website. So I'm going to talk more generally about what the Buchardt gives us for more money, because the Buchardt sell for just under 4,000 euros and these are about 2,000 euros each roughly. So it's, around double. But of course, you should not make any firm purchasing decision until you tried the Buchardt for yourselves. Now you can do that because Buchardt have a 45-day home trial and they will ship anywhere in the world and they'll return them from anywhere in the world for 25 bucks, I think. So it's very easy with their factory direct sell model to demo the Buchardt loudspeakers. So in my experience, stand mounts like these, they only really hint at what's in the low bass regions. They only really sort of like suggest or imply what's there, which is perfectly fine for what they are. But whatever magic Buchardt have worked into their A500 loudspeaker, they give us much more lower bass. I mean, they go down to 25 hertz. 25 hertz. It's almost a full range speaker. So we just get we get more bass, we get better bass, we can hear all the low bass notes, they're very cleanly defined, we get good textural information. I guess what I'm saying here is that the low bass on the Buchardt absolutely, I don't use this word often, absolutely smokes what comes out of these two loudspeakers. It's a different world. But also we get that sort of, that forward push, that momentum, that weight that I talk about a lot from the Buchardts that we don't really get from these two loudspeakers. We do a little bit from the KEF, less so from the Navis. The Navis are a bit more polite. but the Buchardt, they kind of behave almost like a small floor stander. And that makes the A500 a much more present and visceral and physical listening experience than these two here. I guess these are a bit more intellectual, but the Buchardt gives us that kind of, the intellectual feel and all the detail, but all the weight and the push and the excitement. Yeah, it's a different world, it really is. The other thing we often hear about stand mount loudspeakers from their users is that I like my speaker, but I find that I have to turn up the volume to really make them come alive. And that's because of a scientific phenomenon that is really encapsulated by Fletcher-Munson curves. So what that means is as the volume decreases, we are less sensitive to bass and treble. So what Buchardt have done to compensate for this is they've implemented something in their DSP called low level enhancement. I think it's called that. And what that does is at low volumes, or the lower the volume goes, the more they sort of tilt the bass and the treble up so that we don't feel we're robbed of presence or low end or even treble or dynamics or whatever. And so Buchardt's low level correction means that the A500 are more satisfying to listen to at low volume levels than these two loudspeakers and pretty much any stand mount that I can think of. Now, I also think that the A500 are more transparent, just slightly, than the LS50 Wireless and quite a bit more than the ELAC Navis. Because the Navis are warmer and a little bit more, I don't know, what's the word? They obfuscate some of the low-level detail a little bit more than I would like sometimes. So where the Buchardts really step forward over these two loudspeakers is on player placement. So we were listening to Iggy Pop's The Passenger before, and you can get Iggy Pop's voice over here, a drum sound over here, a guitar over here. So you know where everything fits in the soundstage. And so the soundstage creation of the Buchardts is really quite incredible. And they do it in a way that isn't as uber precise as the Kii Three. The Kii Three are like absolutely almost laser guided. And I think the Buchardt, for me, do it in a more elegant manner. And what I mean by that is that the dispersion pattern of the tweeter, because you can see that the waveguide's there, I think what that does is help almost spray detail like a fine mist around the speakers and between the speakers. And so that tweeter never ever insists on its own presence. You're not really cognizant of there being a tweeter there. And I can't say that necessarily about the Kii Three. So with my Kii Three configuration, what I do is I dial the tweeter down to -1, just to take it down a little bit. So it also has DSP inside. But yeah, that's an interesting finding. So this isn't what I would call a flat/neutral speaker, as I might do the Kii Three or a Genelec loudspeaker. It's a little bit warmer, a little bit more fuzzy at the edges. Yeah, it's not quite as crisp. The A500 don't have that sort of amphetamine-driven transparency that the Kii have. And for me, I think they're all the better for that. Because I'm not working in a recording studio wanting to know every last detail of my mix. I want the detail to be presented, but in a very convivial manner, which we get from these Buchardt. Yeah, they're just great. Bringing it back to the KEF and the ELAC. Yes, hi-fi is all about diminishing returns. And people often say, well, John, if I spend almost £4,000 on a speaker, it's not going to be twice as good as these £2,000 speakers. And ordinarily, I would agree with you. Absolutely. But in this particular case, I find it very hard not to claim that these Buchardt actives do actually give us twice the sound. Well, it's not just twice the sound, it's twice the utility as well. But I do think we get one heck of a lot more for our money. So I'll qualify that further. Many of you will know, regular viewers will know that I've been alternating between the Klipsch Forte 3 and the JBL L100 Classic for most of this year. I can honestly say, hand on heart, that I get a more personally satisfying sound from these Buchardt than any of the Klipsch amplifier or JBL and amplifier combinations that I've used, any of them. Now, maybe that's because the Buchardt just happened to be the better fit for my 6 metre by 5 metre room here. It could well be that. I'm just here to relay my experiences, but you've got to be careful here because I'm not saying that the A500 is better than a JBL and an amplifier or a Klipsch and an amplifier. I'm saying in my room, because the room is such a major component in any loudspeaker system. And because the Bucharts also have the room correction built in, it just makes them an even better fit. And if I wanted to tweak it further, I could mess around with the master tunings. And I know that Mads Buchardt is working on more master tunings. So, yeah, I can't enthuse about these loudspeakers enough. Yeah. And the one thing I like about the master tunings is they address one sort of fundamental flaw for many traditional audiophiles in active loudspeakers or streaming loudspeakers, is that when you generally buy a streaming loudspeaker or an active loudspeaker, there isn't very much left to play with or to tweak or to change. Audiophiles like to buy, their speakers here and their amp here and the DAC and the streaming all separately. And with an all-in-one speaker, you don't get that possibility. But what the master tunings give us is a way to sort of scratch that upgrade itch or that kind of I need something different itch. And I think that is truly wonderful. I think that's very important that loudspeaker manufacturers, especially active loudspeaker manufacturers who want to capture the sort of old school audiophile, they do give that level of flexibility to him or her. Now, one of the fundamental appeals of the ELAC Navis is they're not DSP based. They're active, but they're not DSP, which means, and I showed this in my video at the time, we can add an external DAC preamp like the Mytek Brooklyn Bridge to these and change the sound. So you might be wondering, well, what if I add the bridge to the Navis? Does it then sound as good as the A500 Buchardt? And the short answer is no, it doesn't. Because it doesn't have basically the room correction. I mean, these do fit very nicely to my room, but they just don't seem to be, well, these don't have the low end push of the Bucharts. They don't have the detail or the transparency or the soundstage height, to be honest. So the Bucharts really are in another league, even when we add an external DAC to this loudspeaker. We wouldn't do it to the LS50 Wireless because the DACs are built inside and we can't bypass them. But what I really like about the Buchardt A500 is yes, they have my holy trinity of streaming, but I can also add my turntable into the back of the hub, and then that can stream. I know for many people that just creates like tiny explosions in their brain, that I'm digitizing and streaming my turntable's output and the phono stage. But I'm not doing it over Bluetooth, I'm doing it over lossless PCM 2496 over Wi-Fi. And the benefit of that, as we saw last week with the NAD M33 amplifier with a DRAC, the benefit is we can apply room correction and also the master tunings to our turntable. Our turntable does not get frozen out. And I'll say it again, those people who refuse room correction because it digitizes their turntable are missing out. So if you're thinking of like upgrading your phono stage or upgrading your cartridge, you know, for a slightly better sound, or even the interconnect between the table and the phono stage, I would ask you to really consider the potency of room correction, or really consider how much your room is messing up your sound and how much room correction can correct for some of it, not all of it, but some of it. I mean, DSP is what powers noise cancelling headphones. And I would defy anybody to complain about what they do. Really, I mean, the benefits that they give us out in the street. And so DSP at home, you know, allows us to change the sound of our speaker. It allows also Buchardt to optimize the sound of their speaker over time according to customer feedback. Because they sell direct, Mads Buchardt apparently is always in touch with his customer base, and they can provide feedback, and then he can produce another master tuning and another one. So there are many things to play with. And I think that as we go forward, this loudspeaker will get better and better and better, which is quite frankly astonishing, because I've got to say, I think this is probably one of the best products I have ever reviewed, and I've been doing it 10 years now. And I think it's wonderful that I get to sort of crown that anniversary, crown that achievement. You don't crown an anniversary, you crown an achievement, don't you? To celebrate that anniversary with such a wonderful, wonderful loudspeaker and such a wonderful piece of Future-Fi. If you like this video as much as I enjoyed making it, please smash the like button below. If you like my attitude towards high-end audio, which encompasses with enthusiasm the use of DSP, then please subscribe to this channel. And thank you, as always, for watching. And thank you to those people who have been following what I do for 10 years now, since 2010. Thank you to you. Thank you to everybody that has kind of come along the way. Even the people that don't like the music I listen to. I know that it's kind of alien to many of you. I'm really just talking to the people that like that music. If you want to come along for the ride too, then brilliant. But please don't at me and say I should listen to this other music, because I'm never going to do that. Sorry, I'm not. So for the next 10 years, it's going to be indie rock and techno and alt rock, and I'm going to keep going with that. So yeah, here's the next 10 years. Cheers. Okay. I've started doing this. Hans Beekhausen does this. Is there anything else? I don't think so. I need to do this again. Sorry, it's terrible. Go ahead. Now the WISA streaming is but oh, it's gone. I was about to talk. Don't make me laugh. Normally I make you laugh and the camera goes, woo. All right. And what I mean, and what?
Okay.
I'm doing that thing again.
Yeah, all the time.